Hey everyone, thanks for coming. We are doing Soul and Science Live. Soul and Science is a podcast that we do at Mekanism. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Mekanism. We're part of Plus Company. If you guys are hungry for candy afterwards, there's a candy station out front. And we do this podcast where we talk with the world's leading CMOs and we talk about how they've built their brand, and we get a little personal as well. So this is a live recording. So just be aware of that this will be aired wherever you get your podcasts after this session. All right, so Soul and Science. Does marketing live in the heart or the head? Should you trust your instincts or your integers? Are the world's best brands led by data, or are they led by gut instinct? And that's what we're going to explore on the podcast Soul and Science. And we are joined today by one of the best brands in the world that everyone knows, Shake Shack. And this is the CMO, Jay Livingston of Shake Shack. Give a round of applause for Jay for being here. He took time out of his busy day of opening stores and running product and innovation and marketing to come here and share his wisdom with us. I'll do a quick bio. But as Chief Marketing Officer of Shake Shack, Jay is responsible for marketing, product, and the digital experience, including the Shack app, which I know a lot of you guys have. Prior to Shake Shack, he served as the CMO of Bark, makers of BarkBox, and before that, he was Vice President of Global Marketing at Bank of America. So he's had a lot of different turns in your career. He's also an angel investor, if anyone wants to hit him up after the panel. So before we dive in, we're going to do a real short video to set the stage for the brand we know today as Shake Shack. So the video will play, and then we'll get into the Q&A with Jay.
Back in the summer of 2001, when we were really working hard to create the Madison Square Park Conservancy to help bring life and beauty to a park that for almost a century had fallen into disrepair, we thought, wouldn't it be great to bring public art to the park, give people a reason to use it on a daily basis?
Right where I'm sitting, we put New York taxis on stilts, and below it, the artist wanted a hot dog cart. Shake Shack was born as a New York hot dog cart with one goal: to raise a little money for a park. We made hot dogs. We made them in our fine dining French restaurant named 11 Madison Park, one of the finest restaurants in the world, 3 Michelin stars. We used their private dining room kitchen. We asked the question, whoever wrote the rule, a hot dog cart can't serve great food?
And it wasn't until 5 years later that we opened a second Shake Shack, because we were not ever thinking about starting a chain.
Some of the best things about our company's growth has been the international growth, right? The opportunity for our team to go overseas, to learn from our partners, to learn new cultures is so exciting.
We try to inject local flavors wherever it makes sense, while still keeping our core menu true to who we are. Being born out of fine dining allows us to take advantage of an immense network of world-famous chefs that we often collaborate with to push a really innovative and high-end culinary message.
Since the first collab that we've done with Shake Shack has grown and expanded around the world, it's always fun to be a part of it.
As you travel all over the world, the idea of hospitality is one of those things that Danny helped build, and people recognize that. And when you go to a Shake Shack, you just know that it's going to be good. You don't have any questions about that.
Our products, what we serve, is everything. Our respect for the ingredients, the ranchers, the farmers, the people who bring these ingredients to our company and to our table are everything.
When I think of Shake Shack, the one word that definitely comes to my mind is pride, right? Pride in its product, pride in its people, pride in every decision that we make. It's a privilege to work at this company. I wear a burger on my chest and I wouldn't want to do anything else.
It's really important for anyone listening to this to understand that it wasn't meant to be this. I have often said over the last decade, the bigger we get, the smaller we have to act. So that means we worry about this community right here. If we do that, we'll be taking care of other Shack communities around the world. That passion is what built this company into the size that it became today.
If Shake Shack can lead the way and create a whole new revolution for hospitality, it will have been the greatest gift Shake Shack gives the entire world of food.
All right, great video. So Jay, before we get into Shake Shack, tell me about Jay Livingston. What's your origin story? How'd you get into marketing? Did you always know you wanted to get into it, or did you kind of find your way there?
You know, when I was in college, I was promoting concerts. I went to Miami University in Oxford, Ohio, and we had the only student-run concert, fully student-run concert promotion, basically facility in the country. And I realized that I was kind of good at getting big groups of people to do things. So sometimes getting ahead of, if we were trying to talk people to come to a band before they even knew they were interested. And I still say the same thing today. That's kind of what I'm good at, is storytelling and getting people to get behind and get excited about something.
So you kind of started in music?
Yeah, so I started music and that storytelling. I knew the true story is I knew at that time if you wanted to get into marketing, you had two options. You go work for a consumer packaged goods company like Kraft or Procter & Gamble. You stock shelves in Iowa for a couple of years, and then you go back to business school. Or do you move to New York City and make $16,000 in a year working for an ad agency? And both of those seem sort of daunting to me.
I don't think we can pay people $16,000 a year.
I know, I'm aging myself a little bit.
Yeah.
And so I was like, what? I already felt like I was good at marketing.
Yeah.
And the most prestigious sort of programs interviewing on campus were the banks. And they had these management programs. We'd rotate around for 3 years in different areas. You'd learn finance, tech. My thinking was, I'll go join one of these programs, I'll go to business school, and I'll jump into brand management afterwards. So that was my plan. And then I got to Nations Bank at the time in Charlotte, North Carolina, and we just started exploding in size. So we bought 450 banks in 16 years. When I started there, we were sort of a big regional bank, and 16 years later, we were the fourth most profitable company in the world.
Wow.
So that growth was just off the charts. People sometimes say like, well, you've never been in a growth company before, when I tell them I was at Bank of America, and it's like, actually, it was a massive growth company.
Yeah.
So learned a lot there, and then basically from that stage, there's a thing at the bank called the Rule of 60, which is your age plus years of service. So when I turned 41, I hit that, and you get to retire with benefits. They got rid of it years ago, but I was grandfathered in. So I told them a year out, I said, I haven't had more than 2 weeks of vacation in 20 years. I want to travel the world, restore an old muscle car, like start a political effort. I wanted to produce a couple of films. I wanted to do all this stuff, knowing I'd jump back in and be a CMO somewhere. I know this is a little bit of a long story, but I'll finish soon. So I was also doing some angel investing during that time, and I loved being close to these aggressive young founders that were really on the cutting edge of the spaces they were in. And I miss being that close to the company or close to the customer again. So I knew the guys that were running BarkBox, and basically when I was ready to start after about 2 years, they said, well, we need our first ever CMO. So I started there, had a great experience there. And then I met Danny, and he said, we're hiring our first ever CMO at Shake Shack. You should come talk to Randy Garutti, our CEO. I think you guys would get along. Had a conversation, we got along. I love passion brands like Shake Shack. There was so much energy. We're opening one every 3 days somewhere in the world.
That's amazing.
And that was just super exciting to me. So jumped on.
So he pulled you out of early retirement.
That's right. It'll be 4 years in January.
And what's the commonalities or differences between, I guess, banking, selling pet products, and fast casual? What do you see? Like, is there a thread in how you look at marketing, or is it all completely different?
Well, one is, if you think about the three biggest things people might be passionate in life about: dogs, food, probably babies, which I haven't covered yet, and money. Right? These are the things that really drive people. And I've said I want to work at a consumer facing business that makes a physical product that brings people joy. And BarkBox was certainly that, and Shake Shack's certainly that. So that's a consistent theme, I think.
Do you feel like you stayed in banking too long? After having those two other experiences?
The huge benefit of staying with a company past where you can jump out and make more money or jump to a little bit higher position is you have a network within that business, and you have credibility and the ability to get things done. And I could have left many times. Early in my career, it would have been consulting firms. Later, it was ad agencies, where you could have jumped. But the bank said, whatever you want to do here, we'll help you do. You want to live in Chicago, we'll move you there. You want to live in New York, we'll move you there. If you want to work in one of these other areas, we'll do that as long as you continue to perform. And I think people are way too quick to run away from that, because my whole goal was, when I step out, can I do it at an equal or higher level? And as long as I'm still moving up through the company, and I feel like I could do that when I step out, I'm going to stay there. And I love my experience. I counsel young people all the time. Think before you jump. Like, if you just do 1.5 years at every business, you're not going to have the same sort of foundation.
I love that. I did an interview with the CMO of GE, Linda Boff, who's been at GE, and she's well known. And she says you should always try to reinvent yourself first at the company you're at before just jumping to another company to reinvent yourself. I thought that was good advice, which you share. All right, so during the pandemic, obviously I have to ask a pandemic question, because why not? But how did you have to pivot your strategy to sort of digital from hospitality, and how did that affect the company? And how long had you been there when the pandemic started?
I'd been there about 2 years.
Okay, so you're 2 years in, everything's changing, people are staying at home.
Yep.
What did you have to do as a marketer?
Well, so I oversee digital as well, which is lucky for us to be able to do in marketing. And the day before COVID broke out, sales at Shake Shack were 85% physical in the Shacks. In other words, 85% of our orders were in a Shack, 15% digital. 3 days later, it was 85% digital, 15% in Shack. And it's been coming down,
crazy.
But it's not, it's at about 43% digital now. And I'm not sure it falls that far below that ever.
Yeah.
It's a massive switch for us. It made us look and say, we've got to accelerate all these things we're doing around digital innovation. We need a better app, we need a better website. We blew up our delivery relationship with just one provider and went to 6 and immediately built that. And it basically accelerated a lot of the digital investments that we knew we needed to make, whether it's curbside pickup, whether it's having more basically loyalty built into the app. And it even made us say we're going to launch drive-thrus, which we'd always say we'll never do because of the way we cook our food.
Right.
That's not a digital effort, but it requires a lot of digital engagement to run a great drive-thru. So we launched our first one about 6 months ago, and we'll continue to open drive-thrus around the country over the next 10 years.
So you see that staying? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, unless something bad happens. It's hard when you cook everything to order. We're not like a restaurant that's basically pulling out pucks, right? And frozen food and heating it and turning it out. We make everything to order, and that's much harder in a drive-through for us.
Yeah.
It's a little slower, but we're figuring it out, and we think it's important.
Yeah. I also read an article last week that you're doing virtual burgers in Sims 4.
We are.
Yeah, what's that all about?
I mean, we want to understand all these new places of where guests are watching and looking and participating, whether it's gaming, whether it's the metaverse, NFTs. Sims 4, we had a teammate with an authentic passion around building a presence within that game. And so we said, that's a fun place to learn. Like, let's build a shack in there and kind of see what happens.
Yeah, that's
so
cool.
It's been fun.
And how do you is it just more experimental, or is there some type of measurement you're trying to get out of it?
My attitude with all these technologies, and frankly all these social channels and even influencers, is you want to be dabbling a little bit. It's tempting to go with what's been working and stay there.
Yeah.
So you think of all the D2C businesses that learn performance marketing really well, but then when they made changes to iOS or something else, they didn't have other places to invest money. And it caught them a little bit off guard. My thing is, you always want to carve, even if it's painful, a little bit of money out. And I want to understand Be Real. I want to understand TikTok. And I want to understand these. So when one of them blows up, we're not sitting on our heels. We're ready to actually invest more. But it means you're going to have some failures. It means you're going to invest in a few things that won't take off. But I think it's a worthwhile spend to do.
When you think about your marketing mix in that way, do you think of this much goes to physical, this much goes to digital, this much goes to experimentation, or is it not as measured as that? Is it a little more
It's not as
ad hoc?
measured as that.
Yeah.
I really do, one of my mantras is go where the eyeballs are.
Yeah.
So part of that is going where they're going, right? I think we were a little too slow to TikTok early, but we're really good on Instagram, and we have a massively engaged platform there. And it's hard when you get really good at something to make that pivot, but the eyeballs are going to TikTok, so we're going to need to establish more of a presence there, and we have to some degree, but that's I think that's a marketer's job, is to be ahead of that, figure out how do I allocate capital to the things that are going to get us the most exposure and not waste it on things that aren't.
Right. So in terms of fast casual, what do you see as the future, and how do you think about where you're going next and how you differentiate yourself from, and first of all, how do you think of fast casual in your competitive set? Because people want to maybe lump you into QSR, but you're not really QSR.
Right.
So I guess I'll start with, how do you think of your competitive set? And then how do you think of the future of your competitive set?
I mean, Shake Shack in some ways kind of established this category, right? This better burger category that has been highly copied now. But we have kind of two guests, which is interesting. We have guests that will not eat fast food, but they'll eat Shake Shack, right? So that's a big guest for us. And then another guest who eats fast food pretty regularly, and we're a little bit of their splurge, their celebration. It's date night. It's taking the family for a little bit of a special thing. Challenge for us is always how to go from special to habitual a little bit more. And so when we think about our product
You're
mix,
trying to get the frequency up of that customer.
So we're launching a bunch of cool things, not all of which I can talk about right now, to kind of help do that this year. But also, we're never going to chase trends. Like, people love a great burger. You know, our three things that we focus on is our ingredients raise the bar. Like, all of our money in our company goes into our ingredients and making those ingredients great. Being an asset to our neighborhoods, so we want to feel local. We talk a lot about when someone says, my Shake Shack's the Upper East Side, or my Shake Shack's on Lincoln Road, I know we've kind of got them. That's a great place versus a Shake Shack, right? So my Shake Shack is a big thing. We want to be part of those communities, not feel like a chain. We do a lot of local things. And then lastly, we want to provide like an uplifting experience. So it's not just food, but do you have fun? Do you love the experience? I mean, you can see the vibes from how we kind of came about. When people all the time, when I walk out of here, I'll have 5 people say, I love Shake Shack. That's not something I'm doing from a marketing standpoint. That's just the experience they've had there. And we want to lean in onto that passion like all the time.
And so how do you, that passion, I like that idea of the ingredients and community. How do you articulate the Shake Shack magic? Like, if someone didn't know about Shake Shack, how would you position it or articulate what makes Shake Shack so unique?
One is
because I think everyone agrees it is absolutely something different. So how do you articulate that?
Not getting distracted off that ingredient story and telling that story. So a lot of folks know that in New York City because they know the Danny Meyer origin story. They know kind of how we came about out of fine dining. But you know, when we're opening in Kansas City and all over the country and the world, we're gonna have to work to tell that story a little bit more. Some places we're an expensive burger, and we're compared to places that don't have the same level of ingredients. And so you walk out and say, wow, I just paid $8 for that burger, and this other one was part of a value deal, and the whole thing was $10. Why wouldn't I do that? Our job is to tell people that ingredient story without having a ton of money to spend on advertising right now, because we're actually not that big, even though we're growing. So that's a challenge we talk about all the time.
What are you guys, like 700 million, something like that in revenue?
We'll get close to $1 billion.
Close to $1 billion in revenue?
Yeah. Next year.
And so when you think about that Shake Shack magic and that difference, and then you think about your 2 customers that you mentioned, how do you think about, and community, so like someone who's in New York and is very familiar with Shake Shack, and then you go to, you said Kansas City, or you're opening somewhere new, do you think about, is there like a national or international consistent story, or is it like our Shake Shack story in Kansas City is this, our Shake Shack story in New York is this? Is it local marketing, or do you think about it in a national, international level?
I think the reality is a little bit of both. Kind of like politics, all marketing is local. So when we open somewhere, we really want to go in with a bang. We want to have a great opening, be a part of that community, work with local chefs. We have local artists that do hoardings around our shacks and in our shacks. We want to be part of that community. Our general managers have a lot of autonomy. We really empower them to act like entrepreneurs and run those restaurants. And I have a great regional marketing team that's out there supporting them in all those markets. They live in those markets. So they need to be a part of those communities. They do donation days, they get involved in charitable giving locally, all that stuff. With that said, our ingredients are not going to vary, same internationally. We ship ingredients all over the world because if we can't find it in a certain country and it comes from our beef provider or chicken provider, we're going to make sure they get the same thing you have here. So we will not compromise on the food or the ingredients or the way they cook it.
And so you're in, I think we talked about this, you're in 16 countries about?
A little over.
We're
going to add a few this year.
And do you think about the ingredients is consistent? You have to find in those countries like basically local ambassadors to carry the story forward, but add the international twist to it. Is that how you look at it, or how do you look at it from a international perspective?
One is we own all Shake Shacks in the U.S. except for stadiums and airports, which you kind of have to license. We license Shake Shacks to one licensee per country overseas. Often it's a family in that country that owns maybe one or two other really great franchises. They'll own Starbucks or somewhere like that. That licensee we pick very carefully because they are going to help dictate our brand and how we go in that country and the rest of the world. We have a great international marketing team that works really closely with them to make sure they're demonstrating the values and everything we want them to do. But then they have some freedom to localize that, to work with local chefs. They come up with all sorts of, like we had a cherry blossom shake in Japan that was so successful there, we brought it to the US and it's been hugely successful here. Korean style fried chicken was a great sandwich there we worked on with chefs in Korea that we, and then we basically brought a lot of that to the US and it was a huge hit here. So we do a lot of that, but we want to work with the best chefs in the world, work on these really interesting products, and then share all that information.
And you have a unique job as a CMO, which I think is different than almost any CMO that I've talked to, where you oversee the marketing, but also product innovation. And so I know Hot Ones has been like very popular, for example. How do you determine as a marketer, because maybe the way you guys market the product is part of the marketing, right?
Yeah.
Like you think about that holistically. How do you determine what partners you're going to go after and how you do product innovation? Because also people love what they love at Shake Shack. Like they want a little innovation, but they don't want a lot of innovation. They don't want like a new thing like at QSRs, which you're not because you're fast casual, but the way you get those sales is by, how many times can Taco Bell come out with a new taco combo, right?
Right.
How do you think about product innovation for Shake Shack?
Well, culinary is part of marketing, which is a huge advantage because nobody ever comes to marketing and says, hey, go sell this.
Yeah.
And then when it doesn't work, they come to marketing and say, why didn't you sell this very well? And my mantra has always been like, great companies build marketing into the product. And an example of that is Hot Ones right now. So, when you think about, we don't have a ton of money to spend on advertising at this point in our game. We don't do mass advertising yet, et cetera. Hot Ones, we have a great relationship with. First We Feast. It's a program that, Sean is out there sitting down with celebrities and they eat progressively hotter chicken wings on the Hot Ones show. And they've got this big reach. And so we said, why don't we build our next spicy chicken sandwich with them? We know guests want it. We love their chefs and their hot sauces. Let's do it together. And now we've sort of built in this media network in this show. And Sean Evans is out there talking about us in a big way. And the
that's smart because then that partnership comes with a whole audience.
Yeah, it comes with a megaphone built in. And it's really killed it. And that's an advantage of having the product be in the marketing organization. I don't sit down, like there's a group of about 10 of us that make all the decisions of the product. I don't sit down with Randy, and Danny will come in sometimes, and we've got these celebrity chefs, Mark Rosati, and they're awesome, and say, man, the mouthfeel on this is not right for me, or I don't like how these acids are balancing. Like, I don't do any of that. My job is to say, like, what's the story we're going to tell around this? Like, and having those two together and work really closely has worked well for us.
Do you think, because you mentioned you don't have enough money to do mass awareness campaign. Do you think that would hurt the brand if you did have the money to do it? Like, would you do it if you could? Or do you think the way you're building the brand, kind of local with partnerships, store by store, do you think that's a better model?
I think Jeff Bezos said years ago, like, advertising is what you do when you have a bad product somehow. And he's now, Amazon's the biggest advertiser in the world. So these things change.
Right, yeah. When you get big enough, these things change.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What I would say is, as long as you're authentically who you are, if you want to grow fast, you've got to tell people about who you are, I believe, with mass advertising ultimately. You can do it, like we're up against competitors that have been around for 65, 70 years, and they've grown really slowly, and they have the ability to kind of ease their way into that, right? They don't have to bombard it with a lot of advertising. We're going to have to tell our story out there. It's going to be with experiential, social, great PR, a lot of those things. We do all our design in-house. That gives us a big advantage. But we got to tell that story, I think, at scale. So we're going to test our way into some mass advertising to understand what that does.
All right, we're winding down here. So the Soul and Science podcast is about, does marketing live in the head or the heart? As a marketer and CMO, do you make decisions based on more data and insights, or do you make decisions based on getting together with Randy and the team and saying, this is what we're going to do? So how do you do that?
When I got to Shake Shack, we were all instinct. And it was even apparent to me in our interviews, everything is done by instinct. And Randy said, who would you hire first if you come in? And I said, I'm going to build a guest insights and analytics function, because I want to be instinct-led but data-supported. So I don't want to take away that great instinct of like a bunch of great chefs and foodies that we want to be ahead of where people are, but I want data to support that. I want data to say, hey, maybe you should look in this direction because your guests really love this, or maybe you shouldn't do this because you're about to walk into a trap, right? And so that's really what we've done, is we're going to be instinct-led, we're going to be data-supported, and manage a little bit more by fact. And now we have a great data organization that helps us really figure that out.
And you sort of brought that when you came in.
Yeah, for sure. Sometimes.
And was there resistance to that, where they're like, no, we don't need the
Of course, of course. They don't like it when
Yeah.
someone says, you know, they'll say, you're going to let focus group. This is real talk. You know, you'll get a founder-led business, and they'll say, you're going to let focus groups run this company. Like, we're not going to do it. Like, Randy, we're not going to do focus groups. We're not going to let him run the company. But it's great to hear, you know, the nuggets that you get, the color that you get when you actually talk to guests. And when you hear what guests have to say, it's going to make us better. It's going to make our instincts better. If you lead an advertising agency, I'm sure you feel like you're a very instinctive creative.
Yeah.
But if you're never out there talking to people and getting inspiration, you're probably not, you're going to make some mistakes.
Well, you have to also sell work based on data.
That's right.
So you have, that's the way you have to do it. So, all right, some final soulful questions. I got like 2 or 3 for you. What has Jay Livingston learned in his career that you wish you knew sooner?
That I wish I knew sooner. I think one is, so the angel investing I started doing, I think of this lesson a lot of the time. I decided I was going to set aside some money and invest in a bunch of unsexy, income-producing businesses around New York. And I sat down with this kind of well-known VC, and I told him my strategy. And he's like, you're doing it all wrong. He goes, that is such a bad way to do it. He goes, you need to take that money and invest in the smartest, most interesting, most authentic people you can find in areas that you're passionate about. And you're probably not going to write it off, because you're competing against people like me when it comes to purely making money. But he said, if you have all those relationships and align yourself with those smart people and learn from them, that'll pay off in spades for you in your career more broadly. And I remember right as he was saying that, like, ugh. He's so right. That's really the way I should be doing it. And I've kind of followed that now. Yeah. But I think that's just a good thing to think about in life, is aligning yourself with smart, interesting, diverse, fascinating people that think differently the way you do, and get skin in the game. Like, help them
Whether
somehow.
you're investing, angel investing, or investing in yourself, that's like
right.
a good rule to follow.
Right.
All right, last question. Do you have a mantra or a quote that you always go back to, or that you sort of drives your career or the way you think?
If I could put a billboard up, because I got that question before, I said the same thing. There's no one way to do it. And I believe that in your life, the personal life, and the decisions you make in your personal life. I believe it in your work. There is no one way to do it. You know, I grew up in, which I love the South. I grew up in Knoxville, Tennessee, and things were kind of traditional. Then went into banking and things were kind of traditional. My role has always been to be provocative and contrarian and try to get people to think about, is there another way to do this? Because it doesn't have to be this one way. So that's kind of been a little bit of my mantra.
That's awesome. All right, well, let's give it up for Jay. There's more than one way to do this. Livingston. And thank you for coming. And I hope you guys got a lot. I hope you guys go get a Shake Shack burger after this.
Please.
But thanks for being part of the podcast. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
All right.